So I still haven't finished this Luang Kun translation that I was working on, and hope to have that tomorrow. So I thought I would read from the Four Noble Truths, an old classic from Luang Sumedho. Has anybody read from this yet? I wasn't at a lot of the readings. Nobody's read from Four Noble Truths? Okay. And particularly the section on the path, and I think in the readings we haven't gone into that so much. Part 4, the path, the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth, like the first three, has 3 aspects. The first aspect is there is the eightfold path, the Atangika Magga, the way out of suffering. It is also called the Arya Magga, the Aryan or noble path. The second aspect is this path should be developed. The final insight into arahantship is this path has been fully developed. The Eightfold Path is presented in a sequence, beginning with right or perfect understanding, sama ditti. It goes to right or perfect intention or aspiration, sama sankappa. These first 2 elements of the path are grouped together as wisdom, panya. Moral commitment, or sila, flows from panya. This covers right speech, right action, and right livelihood, also referred to as perfect speech, perfect action, and perfect livelihood, sama vaca, sama kammanta, and sama ajiva. Then we have right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, sama vayama, sama sati, and sama samadhi, which flow naturally from sila. These last 3 provide emotional balance. They are about the heart that is liberated from self-view and from selfishness. With right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, the heart is pure, free from taints and defilements. When the heart is pure, the mind is peaceful. Wisdom, panya, or right understanding and right aspiration, comes from a pure heart. This takes us back to where we started. These, then, are the elements of the Eightfold Path, grouped into 3 sections: wisdom, panya, right understanding, sama ditti, right aspiration, sama sankappa. So sama ditti and sama sankappa make up wisdom, panya. 2, morality, sila, is right speech, or sama vaca, right action, sama kammanta, right livelihood, sama ajiva. 3, concentration, samadhi, is right effort, sama vayama, right mindfulness, sama sati, right concentration, sama samadhi. The fact that we list them in order does not mean that they happen in a linear way, in sequence. They arise together. We may talk about the Eightfold Path and say, first you have right understanding, then you have right aspiration, but actually presented in this way, it simply teaches us to reflect upon the importance of taking responsibility for what we say and do in our lives. Right understanding. The first element of the Eightfold Path is right understanding, which arises through insights into the first 3 noble truths. If you have these insights, then there is perfect understanding of Dhamma, the understanding that all that is subject to arising is subject to ceasing. It's as simple as that. You do not have to spend much time reading all that is subject to arising is subject to ceasing to understand the words, but it takes quite a while for most of us to really know what the words mean in a profound way, rather than just through cerebral understanding. To use modern colloquial English, insight is really gut knowledge. It's not just from ideas. It's no longer, I think I know, or, oh yes, that seems a reasonable, sensible thing. I agree with that. I like that thought. That kind of understanding is still from the brain, whereas insight knowledge is profound. It is really known, and doubt is no longer a problem. This deep understanding comes from the previous 9 insights. So there's a sequence leading to right understanding of things as they are, namely that all that is subject to arising is subject to ceasing and is not self. With right understanding, you have given up the illusion of a self that is connected to mortal conditions. There is still the body, there are still feelings and thoughts, but they simply are what they are. There's no longer the belief that you are your body or your feelings or your thoughts. The emphasis is on things are what they are. We are not trying to say that things are not anything at all, or that they are not what they are. They are exactly what they are and nothing more. But when we are ignorant, when we have not understood these truths, we tend to think things are more than what they are. We believe all kinds of things, and we create all kinds of problems around the conditions that we experience. So much of human anguish and despair comes from the added extra that is born of ignorance in the moment. It is sad to realize how the misery and anguish and despair of humanity is based upon delusion. The despair is empty and meaningless. When you see this, you begin to feel infinite compassion for all beings. How can you hate anyone or bear grudges or condemn anyone who is caught in this bond of ignorance? Everyone is influenced to do things they do by their wrong views of things. As we meditate, we experience some tranquility, a measure of calm in which the mind has slowed down. When we look at something like a flower with a calm mind, we are looking at it as it is. When there's no grasping, nothing to gain or get rid of, then if what we see, hear, or experience through the senses is beautiful, it is truly beautiful. We are not criticizing it, comparing it, trying to possess or own it. We find delight and joy in the beauty around us because there is no need to make anything out of it. It is exactly what it is. Beauty reminds us of purity, truth, and ultimate beauty. We should not see it as a lure to delude us. These flowers are here just to attract me, so I'll get deluded by them. That's the attitude of the old meditating grump. When we look at a member of the opposite sex with a pure heart, we appreciate the beauty without the desire for some kind of contact or possession. We can delight in the beauty of other people, both men and women, when there is no selfish interest or desire. There is honesty, things are as they are. This is what we mean by liberation, or vimutti in Pali. We are liberated from those bonds that distort and corrupt the beauty around us, such as the bodies we have. However, our minds can get so corrupt and negative and depressed and obsessed with things that we no longer see them as they are. If we don't have right understanding, we see everything through increasingly thick filters and veils. Right understanding is to be developed through reflection, using the Buddha's teaching. The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is a very interesting teaching to contemplate and use as a reference for reflection. We can also use other suttas from the Tipitaka, such as those dealing with paticca-samuppada, dependent origination. This is a fascinating teaching to reflect upon. If you can contemplate such teachings, you can see very clearly the difference between the way things are as Dhamma and the point where we tend to create delusion out of the way things are. That's why we need to establish full conscious awareness of things as they are. If there's knowledge of the Four Noble Truths, then there is Dhamma. With right understanding, everything is seen as Dhamma. For example, we are sitting here. This is Dhamma. We don't think of this body and mind as a personality with all its views and opinions and all the conditioned thoughts and reactions that we have acquired through ignorance. We reflect upon this moment now as, this is the way it is. This is Dhamma. We bring into the mind the understanding that this physical formation is simply Dhamma. It is not self. It is not personal. Also, we see the sensitivity of this physical formation as Dhamma rather than taking it personally. I'm sensitive, or I'm not sensitive. You're not sensitive to me. Who's the most sensitive? Why do we feel pain? Why did God create pain? Why didn't he just create pleasure? Why is there so much misery and suffering in the world? It's unfair. People die and we have to separate from the people we love. The anguish is terrible. There's no Dhamma in that, is there? It's all self-view. Poor me. I don't like this. I don't want it to be this way. I want security, happiness, pleasure, and all the best of everything. It's not fair that my parents were not arhants when I came into the world. It's not fair that they never elect arhants to be Prime Minister of Britain. If everything were fair, they would elect arhants to be Prime Minister. I'm trying to take this sense of, it's not right, it's not fair, to an absurdity, in order to point out how we expect God to create everything for us and to make us happy and secure. That is often what people think, even if they don't say so. But when we reflect, we see this is the way it is. Pain is like this, and this is what pleasure is like. Consciousness is this way. We feel. We breathe. we can aspire. When we reflect, we contemplate our own humanity as it is. We don't take it on on a personal level anymore or blame anyone because things are not exactly as we would like or want. It is the way it is, and we are the way we are. You might ask why we can't all be exactly the same, with the same anger, the same greed, and the same ignorance, without all the variations and permutations. However, even though you can trace human experience to basic things, each one of us has our own karma to deal with, our own obsessions and tendencies, which are always different in quality and quantity to those of someone else. Why can't we all be exactly equal, have exactly the same of everything, and all look alike, one androgynous being? In a world like that, nothing would be unfair, no differences would be allowed. Everything would be absolutely perfect, and there would be no possibility of inequality. But as we recognize Dhamma, we see that within the realm of conditions, no two things are identical. They're all quite different, infinitely variable and changing. The more we try to make conditions conform to our ideas, the more frustrated we get. We try to create each other and a society to fit the ideas we have of how things should be, but we always end up feeling frustrated. With reflection, we realize this is the way it is. This is the way things have to be. They can only be this way. Now, that is not a fatalistic or negative reflection. It's not an attitude of, that's the way it is and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a very positive response of accepting the flow of life for what it is. Even if it is not what we want, we can accept it and learn from it. We are conscious, intelligent beings with retentive memory. We have language. Over the past several thousand years, we have developed reason, logic, and discriminative intelligence. What we must do is figure out how to use these capacities as tools for realization of Dhamma, rather than as a personal acquisition or personal problem. People who develop their discriminative intelligence often end up turning upon themselves. They become very self-critical and even begin to hate themselves. This is because our discriminative faculties tend to focus on what is wrong with everything. That is what discrimination is all about, seeing how this is different from that. When you do that to yourself, what do you end up with? Just a whole list of flaws and faults that make you sound absolutely hopeless. When we are developing right understanding, we use our intelligence for reflection and contemplation of things. We also use our mindfulness and wisdom together. So now we are using our ability to discriminate with wisdom rather than with ignorance. This teaching of the Four Noble Truths is to help you use your intelligence, your ability to contemplate, reflect, and think in a wise way rather than in a self-destructive, greedy, or hateful way. Right aspiration. The second element of the Eightfold Path is samma sankappa. Sometimes this is translated as right thought, thinking in the right way. However, it actually has more of a dynamic quality, like intention, attitude, or aspiration. I like to use aspiration, which is somehow very meaningful in this Eightfold Path, because we do aspire. It's important to see that aspiration is not desire. The Pali word tanha means desire that comes out of ignorance, whereas sankappa means aspiration not coming from ignorance. Aspiration might seem like a kind of desire to us, because in English we use the word desire for everything of that nature, either aspiring or wanting. You might think that aspiration is a kind of tanha, wanting to become enlightened, bhava tanha. But samma sankappa comes from right understanding, seeing clearly. It's not wanting to become anything. It's not the desire to become an enlightened person. With right understanding, that whole illusion and way of thinking no longer makes sense. Aspiration is a feeling, an intention, attitude, or movement within us. Our spirit rises. It does not sink downward. It is not desperation. When there is right understanding, we aspire to truth, beauty, and goodness. Samma ditthi and samma sankappa, right understanding and right aspiration, are called panya, or wisdom, and they make up the first of the 3 sections of the Eightfold Path. We can contemplate, why is it that we still feel discontented, even when we have the best of everything? We are not completely happy, even if we have a beautiful house, a car, the perfect marriage, lovely bright children, and all the rest of it. And we are certainly not contented when we do not have all these things. If we don't have them, we can think, well, if I had the best, then I'd be content. But we wouldn't be. The earth is not the place for our contentment. It's not supposed to be. When we realize that, we no longer expect contentment from planet Earth. We do not make that demand. Till we realize that this planet cannot satisfy all our wants, we keep on asking, why can't you make me content, Mother Earth? We are like little children who suckle their mother, constantly trying to get the most out of her and wanting her always to nurture and feed them and make them feel content. If we were content, we would not wonder about things. Yet we do recognize that there is something more than just the ground under our feet. There is something above us that we cannot quite understand. We have the ability to wonder and ponder about life, to contemplate its meaning. If you want to know the meaning of your life, you cannot be content with material wealth, comfort, and security alone. So we aspire to know the truth. You might think that that is a kind of presumptuous desire or aspiration. Who do I think I am, little old me, trying to know the truth about everything? But there is that aspiration. Why do we have it if it's not possible? Consider the concept of ultimate reality. An absolute or ultimate truth is a very refined concept. The idea of God, the deathless, of the immortal, it is actually a very refined thought. We aspire to know that ultimate reality. The animal side of us does not aspire. It does not know anything about such aspirations. But there is in each of us an intuitive intelligence that wants to know. It is always with us, but we tend to not notice it. We do not understand it. We tend to discard or mistrust it, especially modern materialists. We just think it's fantasy and not real. As for myself, I was really happy when I realized that the planet is not my real home. I had always suspected it. I can remember even as a small child thinking, I don't really belong here. I've never particularly felt that planet Earth is where I really belong. Even before I was a monk, I never felt that I fitted into the society. For some people, that could be just a neurotic problem, but perhaps it could also be a kind of intuition children often have. When you are innocent, your mind is very intuitive. The mind of a child is more intuitively in touch with the mysterious forces than most adult minds are. As we grow up, we become conditioned to think in very set ways and to have fixed ideas about what is real and what is not. As we develop our egos, society dictates what is real and what is not, and what is right and what is wrong, and we begin to interpret the world through these fixed perceptions. One thing we find charming in children is that they don't do that yet. They still see the world with the intuitive mind that is not yet conditioned. Meditation is a way of deconditioning the mind, which helps us let go of all the hard-line views and fixed ideas we have. Ordinarily, what is real is dismissed, while what is not real is given all our attention. This is what ignorance is. The contemplation of our human aspiration connects us to something higher than just the animal kingdom or the planet Earth. To me, that connection seems more true than the idea that this is all there is. That once we die, our bodies rot, and there's nothing more than that. When we ponder and wonder about this universe we're living in, we see that it's very vast, mysterious, and incomprehensible to us. However, when we trust more in our intuitive mind, we can be receptive to things that we may have forgotten or have never been open to before. We open when we let go of fixed, conditioned reactions. We can have the fixed idea of being a personality, of being a man or a woman, being an English person or an American. These things can be very real to us, and we can get very upset and angry about them. We are even willing to kill each other over these conditioned views that we hold to and believe in and never question. Without right aspiration and right understanding, without panya, we never see the true nature of these views. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. Sila, the moral aspect of the eightfold path, consists of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. That means taking responsibility for our speech and being careful about what we do with our bodies. When I'm mindful and aware, I speak in a way that is appropriate to time and place. Likewise, I act or work according to time and place. we begin to realize that we have to be careful about what we do and say. Otherwise, we constantly hurt ourselves. If you do or say things that are unkind or cruel, there's always an immediate result. In the past, you might have been able to get away with lying by distracting yourself, going on to something else so that you didn't have to think about it. You could forget about all the things for a while until eventually they'd come back upon you. But if we practice sila, things seem to come back right away. Even when I exaggerate, something in me says, "You shouldn't exaggerate. You'd be more careful." I used to have the habit of exaggerating things. It's part of our culture. It seems perfectly normal. But when you are aware, the effect of even the slightest lie or gossip is immediate because you are completely open, vulnerable, and sensitive. So then you are careful about what you do. You realize that it's important to be responsible for what you do and say. The impulse to help someone is a skillful Dhamma. If you see someone fall over on the floor in a faint, a skillful Dhamma goes through your mind. Help this person. And you go to help them recover from their fainting spell. If you do it with an empty mind, not out of any personal desire for gain, but just out of compassion and because it's the right thing to do, then it's simply a skillful Dhamma. It's not personal kamma. It's not yours. But if you do it out of a desire to gain merit and to impress other people because the person is rich and you expect some reward for your action, then, even though the action is skillful, you're making a personal connection with it, and this reinforces the sense of self. When we do good works out of mindfulness and wisdom rather than out of ignorance, they are skillful Dhammas without personal kamma. The monastic order was established by the Buddha so that men and women could live an impeccable life, which is completely blameless. As a bhikkhu, you live within the whole system of training precepts called the Patimokkha discipline. When you live under this discipline, even if your actions or speech are heedless, at least they don't leave strong impressions. You can't have money, so you're not able to just go anywhere until you're invited. You are celibate. Since you live on alms food, you're not killing any animals. You don't even pick flowers or leaves or do any kind of action that would disturb the natural flow in any way. You're completely harmless. In fact, in Thailand, we had to carry water strainers with us to filter out any kind of living things in the water, such as mosquito larvae. It's totally forbidden to intentionally kill things. I have been living under this rule for 25 years now, so I haven't really done any heavy karmic actions. This is obviously given a long time ago. Under this discipline, one lives in a very harmless, very responsible way. Perhaps the most difficult part is with speech. Speech habits are the most difficult to break and let go of, but they can also improve. By reflection and contemplation, one begins to see the unpleasantness of saying foolish things or just babbling and chatting away for no good reason. For lay people, right livelihood is something that is developed as you come to know your intentions for what you do. You can try to avoid deliberately harming other creatures or earning a living in a harmful, unkind way. You can also try to avoid livelihood which may cause other people to become addicted to drugs or drink, or which might endanger the ecological balance of the planet. So these three, right action, right speech, and right livelihood, follow from right understanding or perfect knowing. We begin to feel that we want to live in a way that is a blessing to the planet, or, at least, that does not harm it. Right understanding and right aspiration have a definite influence on what we do and say. So panya, or wisdom, leads to sila, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Sila refers to our speech and actions. With sila, we contain the sexual drive or the violent use of the body. We do not use it for killing or stealing. In this way, panya and sila work together in perfect harmony. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration refer to your spirit, your heart. When we think of the spirit, we point to the center of the chest, to the heart. So we have panya, the head, sila, the body, and samadhi, the heart. You can use your own body as a kind of chart, a symbol of the eightfold path. These three are integrated, working together for realization and supporting each other like a tripod. One is not dominating the other and exploiting or rejecting anything. They work together, the wisdom from right understanding and right intention, Then morality, which is right speech, right action, and right livelihood, and right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, the balanced equanimous mind, emotional serenity. Serenity is where the emotions are balanced, supporting each other. They're not going up and down. There is a sense of bliss, of serenity. There is perfect harmony between the intellect, the instincts, and the emotions. They're mutually supportive, helping each other. They are no longer conflicting or taking us to extremes, and because of that, we begin to feel a tremendous peacefulness in our minds. There is a sense of ease and fearlessness coming from the Eightfold Path, a sense of equanimity and emotional balance. We feel at ease rather than that sense of anxiety, that tension and emotional conflict. There is clarity, there is peacefulness, stillness, knowing. This insight of the Eightfold Path should be developed. This is bhavana. We use the word bhavana to signify development. And this last part is called aspects of meditation. This reflectiveness of mind or emotional balance is developed as a result of practicing concentration in mindfulness meditation. For instance, you can experiment during a retreat and spend 1 hour doing samatha meditation where you are just concentrating your mind on one object, say the sensation of breathing. Keep bringing it into consciousness and sustain it so that it actually has a continuity of presence in the mind. In this way, you are moving toward what is going on in your own body rather than being pulled out into objects of the senses. If you do not have any refuge within, then you are constantly going out, being absorbed into books, food, and all sorts of distractions. But this endless movement of the mind is very exhausting. So instead, the practice becomes one of observing the breath, which means you have to withdraw or not follow the tendency to find something outside of yourself. You have to bring your attention to the breathing of your own body and concentrate the mind on that sensation. As you let go of gross form, you actually become that feeling, that very sign itself. Whatever you absorb into, you become that for a period of time. When you really concentrate, you have to become that very tranquilized condition. You have become tranquil. This is what we call becoming. Samatha meditation is a becoming process. But that tranquility, if you investigate it, is not satisfactory tranquility. There is something missing in it because it is dependent on a technique, on being attached and holding on something that still begins and ends. What you become, you can only become temporarily because becoming is a changing thing. It's not a permanent condition, so whatever you become, you will unbecome. It's not ultimate reality. No matter how high you might go in concentration, it will always be an unsatisfactory condition. Samatha meditation takes you to some very high and radiant experiences in your mind, but they all end. Then if you practice vipassana meditation for another hour by just being mindful and letting go of everything and accepting the uncertainty, the silence and the cessation of conditions, the result is that you will feel peaceful rather than tranquil. And that peacefulness is a perfect peacefulness. It is complete. It's not the tranquility from samatha, which has something imperfect or unsatisfactory about it, even at its best. The realization of cessation, as you develop that and understand that more and more, brings you to true peacefulness, non-attachment, nibbana. Thus, samatha and vipassana are the two divisions in meditation. One is developing concentrated states of mind on refined objects in which your consciousness becomes refined through that concentration. But being terribly refined, having a great intellect, and a taste for great beauty, makes anything coarse unbearable because of the attachment to what is refined. People who have devoted their lives to refinement only find life terribly frustrating and frightening when they can no longer maintain such high standards. Okay, I'll leave that there for today. Any questions or comments? Sometimes I really enjoy reading these old Ajahn Sumedho talks. And, it's kind of hard to believe he was only a monk for 25 years. So Ajahn Kurnadhamma's senior to when he gave that talk.
So in the talk, Ajahn Sumedho mentions like a method of vipassana being like just a letting go and accepting whatever comes up. I had always thought of this more of like a samatha method, and vipassana being more of like a active contemplation. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, he says if you practice vipassana meditation for another hour by just being mindful and letting go of everything and accepting the uncertainty, the silence, and the cessation of conditions, the result is that you'll feel peaceful rather than tranquil. I think with vipassana, what Logpa Sumedho is always pointing to is the insight into impermanence. And so being able to be with the impermanence. Sometimes the way he's talking about it, it can just seem like, well, just be kind of okay with whatever arises. But I think it's more about seeing the impermanent nature of phenomena on a very subtle level. And so it's, it's not just like, it's like I'm feeling really, really enraged towards this person, and that's okay, and I'll just accept that as it is, or feeling this really strong desire, I'll just accept that as it is. But it's more the insight into impermanence that he's pointing to. Sometimes it's difficult with Longpo Sumedho's teachings because he's coming from a place already of incredible purity. So then, for him, yes, it's just accepting everything that comes, but sometimes you have to listen to a lot of his teachings to see that, there's also that purification of the knowing that has to take place through just that gaining experience in the practice. Like he's talking earlier about right aspiration, like aspirations coming from Dhamma rather than ignorance, and that's conditioning everything else. So it's it's an acceptance, but it's once the mind is clean and pure already through the samatha, then he's talking about the vipassana. Yeah, you also have I always appreciated the Ajahn Mahabua way of talking about it too, how in his own practice where he's practicing with the samatha, with the buddho and the breath and so on, but then he's also vipassana it's a contemplation. So to see impermanence, you do have to kind of contemplate. It's a reflective contemplation. So you're not necessarily thinking all the time, but you're very clear and you're making note of conditions as they arise. So then when, that leads to then the deeper samatha, the mind then becomes more peaceful than before, based on the letting go that comes from seeing impermanence and seeing those and gaining insight into the true nature of things. But the trickiness about these teachings is then it doesn't really happen quickly or just from listening to a teaching. It's just pointing the way to that long road that we have to practice for ourselves. I also, on a personal level, I always really appreciate when people start talking about pain. So he mentioned that a few times in there too. Like, why did God create pain? Thought, that thought might have crossed my mind in the past couple weeks.